this go to court and it fail on its merits.
I agree.
But that's obviously a risk for Palworld, and if they're happy to spend, $64,000, which is a meme, that would be cheaper for them than going to court and fighting it.
Yeah, no, I super agree. It's not even 64, it's 32,000, so it's even less.
I think it's
wild.
5 million each to two parties, so 64,000.
Okay. The part that really gets me about this is Legend of Arceus actually Arceus had a worldwide release in January 28th, 2022, a full 2 years after Craftopia. Craftopia also has the same mechanic, also by Pocket Pair. This feels like there's just no case here, man. Like, this is super wild. You have them releasing a game of the mechanics after Pocket Pair. You have them patenting after Pocket Pair even launched Palworld. And after Pocket Pair launched Craftopia. And then retroactively going back and be like, you violated our patents, even though you had that to market first. Like, that's what it looks like to me. And I hope they fight Nintendo, man. Like, if that's the case, I hope they do.
From a principle perspective.
Yeah.
But if we think about how it plays out, they've got this lawsuit going on. They're looking at the lawyers' fees already, which probably fairly considerable as is. If they fight it, it's going to cost them more than $64,000. If they give into it, they're going to have to make more than $64,000 worth of changes to their game inside to comply with the patent, or if they settle and are given an exemption for the patent, they're allowed to continue. So from a purely business perspective, it looks like that settling is the most sensible option. It's just a matter of, is a company going to stand on principle? They might do, but that's not normally what business tends to do.
I agree. I think that the sensible business choice would be to settle. I think that our entire industry would be at a loss for them to do so, and I hope that they fight them.
Yeah, and that's what I think Nintendo are probably banking on.
Yep, especially with such a small suit there. And no, for the person who asked, no, Pocket Pair is not owned by Sony. They are partners in Palworld Entertainment, joint venture company that will develop Palworld's intellectual property in further ways. They are not owned by Sony. It is a partnership. But yeah, no, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not on the side of Nintendo for this. I think Nintendo's making a misstep. I think Nintendo has eroded much of its positive public sentiment towards them over the last several years. You've got them treating kind of the Smash community really badly. You've got them going after creators on YouTube. You have them now doing this, attacking other companies in what looks like really slimy ways. I am not on Nintendo's side. I think that this is too much. And I even though I know it's not the right business decision for them, I hope Pocket Pair is willing to fight them, because I think this is the first chance I have ever seen where Nintendo may lose a lawsuit that it brought to court, and that's never happened before. So I hope they fight them, and I hope that they're not able to just bully around Pocket Pair and be like, take the $32,000 or take this 5 million yen, which is about 32 grand. Just give us that money. You've made hundreds of millions. Just let us set precedent to bully people in the future. I really hope they don't do it, man. I hope they don't take it.
Yeah, the challenge as well is that this is all being obviously bought in Japanese kind of law, which is in different, a lot of ways when it comes to ownership and it comes to patents, what we would call archaic. We wouldn't necessarily say that it's like a move to reflect the times and how things have changed in the Western world, but that's a very different culture over there. And it's important to remember that any Western company that's, say, based in the US has to comply with US patent law, which looks different to this.
Yes.
But it's the start of a slippery slope, and it's not something I think that we want to see happening inside the gaming space, really.
Yeah, I think that's the really scary thing about this is you've got Titan, a company that is very beloved in Japan, and you have a new upstart. You've got an underdog. I also don't know what it means when you're a major company and you file for a patent and then go back and retroactively attack a company that also has those same mechanics. Even though I don't understand the Japanese legal process, that feels wrong. That's like, oh, you made something? Well, I'm going to go patent it and attack you. Something about that doesn't feel right. Like, that shouldn't be that way. Has this happened before? I've not seen this happen. Not in this one.
Things haven't happened like this before, no. This is the start of a bit of a shift. The multiple lawsuits we've seen coming up recently have been a bit of an alarming one where businesses are kind of going at it. What we would see is very anti-consumer methods and reasons.
For those wondering, I find this to be damaging to the games industry heavily. The idea of patenting mechanics on its face even at all is disgusting to me. I think it's a really bad move. I don't think you should patent mechanics. I think you should copyright characters, music, art, etc. to protect your intellectual property. I don't think you should ever at any time be able to patent a game mechanic, because that robs it from everyone being able to express anything inside of that style. I think it's a very strange behavior that I wish was struck down as not being possible. I think it's a waste of resources. I think it's a bad use of patents.
And it is also very important throughout. Some people are saying, people shouldn't be allowed to patent this. This is a new thing. This isn't new. Patenting game mechanics has been around for a while, even in the Western world. If you look at things like, the Nemesis system from the Shadow of Mordor games, etc., the Warner Brothers have. That's a patent that exists in the Western world that's never really been infringed upon because it's very clearly done. But I fully in agreement that we shouldn't be patenting game mechanics and various things like that, because it takes something away from the industry and how it all works, and it is this shift towards this cold corporate environment rather than this creative and fun and focus on enjoyment environment that we want from the gaming kind of industry.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's rather absurd, to be real with you. I mean, even smaller ones, like there was a patent on mini games in loading screens. It's not allowed to have mini games in loading screens. That one was filed, I believe, in 1995, and it expired in because they only last 20 years. So it's already expired, but it was one of those things that was just like really absurd. Yeah, 2015 expired the loading screen minigame patent, yet in 2017, barely any game does this. Yeah, Bandai Namco in 1995 held the patent for auxiliary games that are minigames that can be triggered during loading screens. And they disallowed anyone from being able to do this because they own the patent on running a minigame inside of another game during a load screen. But we don't really have load screens in that capacity. But this is the kind of thing where you're like, you could have had loading screen minigames the whole time. You just had them. It'd be great, right? Couldn't have them. Not until 2015. This is the kind of thing that's just like, why are you able to patent that? That's absurd. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. The dinosaur game in Chrome technically infringed that patent. No, because it wasn't really a load screen. It was you're disconnected from the internet.
Yeah, that was a distinguished item. It's not a load screen. That's a like an error screen, and that's what these patents come down to. They can come down to the absolute smallest kind of feature they can use to differentiate. But if there is a lawsuit brought, you're going to have to argue that, and it's going to be very, very expensive. So a lot of companies just stay away from entire areas of patents just because they don't want to cause a fight, because it's expensive, it's slow, and it takes time.
Yeah,
it takes time, and it creates often a lot of media kind of fury over what should be a small internal matter. I'm not saying the dates on these patents don't matter, but they're not as relevant as the fact that there is a lawsuit outstanding on a company, or 3 separate lawsuits outstanding on a company, and that applies a certain amount of pressure.
It's scare tactics is really what that is.
One of the principles of law, I mean, I don't particularly agree that the show Suits is a good one for showing how the law works, but there are a few comments in there about settling which aren't inaccurate. It is often far more effective for a company to settle than it is to actually fight some of these things out purely on the merits of cost. Like I've said, business is focused on cost and profit. That's how this works at the end of the day. We can't force them to rely on principles, but I fully agree that we, as a consumer base, should be hoping that they choose to fight it on its merits rather than unfolding. But that's down to the lawyers and down to the business choices. We can't fault them either way, depending on what they choose, because it's their prerogative.
The part that's really interesting to me is if you look at this and you look at the timings on them, it seems likely, at least in the realm of possibility, that Nintendo did this specifically to attack Power. And the issue that I have with this is if you are able to find a competitor that is doing well in the market, and you go, I'm going to go patent a bunch of things that we've done too, and now they're also doing, and then we're going to attack those with them even though they were already in the market. That's deeply disturbing. Because that's taking this whole thing to another level that is just not all right.
And if you try doing that in the US or the UK or parts of Europe, then what you would find is as soon as you try filing that patent, someone's immediately going to fight you, and you've got to back your patent claim up in court, and it can take years to get through it. At which point, every single other game out there is starting to use your mechanics because there's no choice on to actually hold the patent. It kind of lets the cat out the bag. The interesting part here, and I want to look into how you file patents in Japan, is the fact that there doesn't seem to have been any contesting of these patents originally, and how all of that works. That's where you would have found kind of the initial battleground. So if there wasn't a battle on that, why not, would be my question.
Because you have a small company that likely did not have the legal wherewithal at the time or the resources to fight it. Because they filed these, Power World only came out January 19th. They filed these in July and August, and February and May. And March. Yep. So you've got basically you've just got a bunch of patents. They saw them on the horizon and went, oh shit, these guys are actually taking a sizable amount of the market. Let's stop them. And filed it before they had any of the type of income or wherewithal to be able to fight.
Yep.
So that's not all right to me, man. That just looks really greasy, and it's upsetting for me because I grew up on Nintendo games, right? I grew up on Nintendo games. I grew up playing these types of games. I grew up being inspired by what Nintendo was doing, and it largely led me to want to go and get into the games industry. I grew up on Super Nintendo, and for me now, it's you've lived long enough to become the villain, and you're doing actual harm to our industry when you were some of the people that created our industry, which is just insane.
For the people in chat talking about, challenging it, that's what we're talking about. The ongoing legal process would be for Palworld to challenge the patents, to challenge the filings, and to go down all of that route. The point is, it's going to cost them significantly more than $64,000, which is what they're being asked for.
Yeah, they said right here...
The wording of the injunction will also be interesting.
Yeah, I would like to know what the injunction is, because it says payment of 5 million yen, payment of 5 million yen, which is a total of $64,000, and an injunction against Palworld. What does that mean? Are they going to tell them to stop playing the game, or like selling the game? They're going to tell, like, what are they going to do? What does that mean? It could be anything.
Yeah, an injunction is such a broadly termed item that it's basically any order to not do something.
It could be
what's
an
it
order
not
to no longer
do?
sell the game. It could be an order to remove the throwing the the Palasphere mechanic. It could be in order to give them a percentage of sale. Like, there's so many different things that could end up being. We will continue to assert our position in this case through future legal proceedings. So it looks like they're gonna fight, is what that seems like to me, based on this wording. And please note that we will refrain from responding individually to inquiries regarding this case. They can't, by the way, so don't reach out to them and bother them. If any of the employees said anything to you at all, it could be used in court. So just don't. Just don't do it. So if any matters arise that require public notice, we will announce them on our website, etc. I hope Palworld wins. I hope Pocket Pair wins this. I hope they fight, and I hope they win. And I am pretty disgusted with what Nintendo's doing right now. Please compare to the official Japan FAQ. Should I search for prior art before applying for a patent? If you intend to file a patent application, you are advised to search for prior art relevant to your invention through a patent information database or have prior art searched by a patent information search company in your country before filing an application. This is for the Japanese Patent Office. Nintendo, did you skip something?
The important thing to recognize is that the patent has been granted. So somebody along somewhere must have reviewed the application and said, despite the prior art, this is in some way distinguished or not, it is still novel, therefore it still applies. And this is what it will come down to, the very, like, the deep intricacies of the law and all of the internal decisions made and the actual mechanics inside the case. This is
There's a little bit more, though.
How we'll be fighting.
If your invention has lost its novelty and is already publicly known, at the time of filing the application, you cannot obtain a patent for the invention.
So how was the patent obtained?
There's the problem. I don't think that patent should have been approved, is what that is.
And that will be what Palworld will fight it on.
And they should.
It's effectively that.
Yeah.
Like
Almost all inventions for which patent applications are filed with the Patent Office in the world are published in patent gazettes. The patent examiner searches those gazettes and other patent information when he or she performs the substantive examination of your patent application. I don't think they did this part properly. I think somebody approved a patent that they otherwise should not have actually approved, which is really, really disappointing. What is likely going to happen to me is if they do go and fight each other, this will come up. They'll want to know why this was issued in the first place, seeing as this.
It's important to note that that section there talks about checking other previously applied for and granted patents. It doesn't apply to, just all uses of it out there in the public.
Correct. Which means that they didn't apply for a patent to it because, I'm going to be honest with you, why would you? It's a game mechanic. So, they likely have a blind spot there because there was no patent applied for it. Nintendo applied for these patents potentially to target them directly, and now they're using them to go and do punitive damage against Pocket Pair and set a really weird precedent of we can patent something after you've released it and then fight you.
Palworld will have to base their case on the fact that these are no longer novel features. These patents shouldn't have been lawful. It's just going to be a bit of an expensive fight for them. And like I said, I'm pleased to see they say they're going to fight in there, but where's the line for Palworld?
Yeah, I mean they're a small team, right? So let's see, how many people work at Pocket Pair? So you've got 55 total employees, and how much did... You've got 442 million gross from Palworld. So they've got some burn time there. They can fight a little bit, but Nintendo has infinite money. That's really what that comes down to. You've got a tyrant with infinite money versus $500 million, which that seems like a lot of money, but it's not when you start dealing with lawyers. Not like that.
The other thing will be that Nintendo will have established internal processes, good lawyers. Those lawyers will have connections inside the patent office. Palworld may not have all of that established kind of groundwork and organization yet because they're a newer firm. They're not as deeply entrenched in the market as Nintendo is. That does make a difference in battles like this.
And to be honest with you, Nintendo knows that. I mean, it's really what that comes to. That's all that comes down to is you've got people that are very familiar with the legal practice, very familiar with what they can get away with, what they can do, and they're fighting a new upstart that, to me, it feels like Pocket Pair is in the right, legitimately.
Unfortunately, the law is not necessarily about who's in the right, and that's one of the issues with it.
Disappointing. Really disappointing. I hope Pocket Pair wins, though, man. Like, my whole take on this is I hope Pocket Pair wins, and I hope that it sends a player signal that says stop patenting game mechanics. I really hope that's it. It just puts up a thing there being like, you need to stop this bullshit. Stop this practice.
With chat saying, could a judge throw this out? What happens when this gets to court? It depends on all kinds of things. Ultimately, it's very unlikely that a judge is going to immediately throw this case out because it's so high profile around the world, and it's Nintendo. A judge isn't going to be like, oh, well, you brought this legal case, we don't think it's got any merit, which can throw it out immediately. They will at least probably hear the case out to a certain extent before making a summary judgment.
I'm also really worried that they will just, out of hand, say, hey, they have a patent, you don't have a patent, you never filed for a patent.
Yeah.
Because there could be that too, where it's like, well, you didn't file for a patent, and they did.
Because,
like,
and that's what's interesting. The case that's being brought is, we have a patent, Pocket Pair have breached it. Not Pocket Pair who need to probably bring a counterclaim related to this, saying, this patent isn't valid, this is why. Those are separate arguments under law. So they may need to be dealt with as a linked, but somewhat separate case. And I'm sure that, Pocket Pair are already way on it.
Yeah, because they'll have to fight basically two legal battles at the same time. One of them is to say, those aren't valid, and the other one is to say, we're fighting them. You've got like multiple fronts on this battle now. It's not simple. It's not as simple as a single court case to prove all of them. You have to do multiples.
And Nintendo will be as willing to pay out as much as it takes, basically, to offset the amount that they're losing from doing this, or what they think they could gain in future. And Nintendo has deep pockets, lots of experience, and knows they can settle in for the long haul on it.
Yeah, that's wild.
So they've not got incentive to settle or to back down.
No, they don't. Yeah, they don't have incentive to back down. And Pocket Bear has every incentive to back down too. Unless, and this is the important one, unless this injunction is something egregious. Then they have every incentive to fight. We just don't know what that is. It could be anything.
Yeah, and sometimes injunctions cannot be disclosed for various reasons.
Pocket Bear is not indie. They have a partnership with Sony. Indie, they were independent before this. They were fully independent. They couldn't form a partnership with any other company. They had to completely build this game entirely on their own without any publishing experience, without any publishing partners of any kind. They now have a partnership with another company specifically because they did so well. That is an indie company. That is an independent company. Up until now. Sony did that afterwards. So I think that is a detriment to their name to say that they're no longer indie, or that they aren't indie, or that they weren't at the time. Develop Power World fully as an indie. Will Sony help? I don't know. I don't know what we don't know what their agreement is as a partnership, right? Because it's a partnership. They don't own them. So it really comes down to that. I don't like Sony publishing. I won't play any games from Sony publishing because the way that they treated Helldivers too. But I don't know what their agreement is with Pocket. No clue. I'm not going to hold that against them. I didn't hold that against Arrowhead either. And that's not their fault.
The other thing to consider here is that partnerships are not necessarily set in stone, and if Sony thinks that this is it's too much of a risk to them,
they'll walk
or
away.
they can't proceed with it, they could also walk away. So it depends on a lot of different moving internal parts inside each of these businesses, and I don't think any of us are informed enough to make a really kind of detailed judgment on this.
Yeah, we just don't know enough about Japanese law. Yeah. That's the hard part.
And how their businesses want to work and want to function. If there's already strained relations between Sony and Power World, this could be enough. Pocket Pair, this could be enough to push them over the edge. But it also, if they're really good friends, Sony could be like, you know what, we're going to join in and help you because we think this is wrong. It could go any way, depending on what's going on inside those companies. We can't jump to any conclusions here.
A lot of people are like saying, I hate Nintendo, all this kind of stuff. I don't like this either. I think it's really bad for Nintendo's image. It ruins a lot of the way that I feel about that company, but it doesn't destroy the good memories I have from playing Nintendo games when I was younger. It doesn't ruin the reason for me to get in the games industry in the first place. What they've become now is separate from those for me. So
it's also very important to remember that this is not Nintendo devs that are necessarily doing this. This is high up Nintendo leadership, the Nintendo legal team, and people who are kind of in decision-making positions. People who are making games for Nintendo or with Nintendo are not the ones that fall there.
Agreed.
This is the top level of the company.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Basically, what it means to me is if a game comes out on Nintendo Switch or something like that, and it also comes out on Steam, I'm buying that Steam version.
Yeah.
How that feels to me. I'll just play it on Steam Deck anyway. It's like, yeah, this is the interesting part. Game Freak isn't even a part of this. Just the Pokemon.
Yeah, that's likely to do with who holds the patents and who's party to various agreements internally. There's probably some legal intricacy going on there. I've never really looked into the exact relationship between Game Freak and the Pokemon Company and Nintendo. There's probably nuance in there. But yeah, this is one to watch, I think. There'll probably be a lot of conversation around this and around patents in general in games as we go on, because this is becoming more and more of an issue. And I do hope we don't see an industry shift towards patenting all of your mechanics. So, your favorite looter shooter mechanic is only going to be in one game ever. You can't learn. It to me will impact the inspiration available to developers and to people who are making games.
Oh yeah, and for those who were wondering if Power World actually used generative AI, no, it did not. The person that stated that it was using generative AI here actually says, I'm doing this because I think it's disgusting how much Power World glorifies animal abuse. They lied about the entire scenario and admitted it all on Twitter. Those models that you saw that were very close, they modified those models to make it look like Palworld was stealing from Nintendo. None of that was true.
Yeah, you get into a very difficult area of, what's inspiration, what I think this kind of animal type looks cool,
And here's the biggest factor for this. For everyone that still thinks the models were stolen or some shit like that, Nintendo didn't sue them. Nintendo would have sued them for copyright infringement, and they didn't. Nintendo's one of the most litigious companies in the world, and you're seeing that now with this patent troll. So if they didn't go after them, pretty sure some people on Twitter don't know better than Nintendo.
Yeah, all of these patents are about, kind of the game system, the processing that the game does, the mechanics itself, rather than about characters. It's very important to separate these two issues. There's no relation.
Copyright and patent law are completely separate. That is absolutely the case. Yeah, this has nothing to do with that. So this is only with patents. But yeah, for the copyright stuff, there's no water being held there at all. Anybody who still thinks that there was copyright infringement is wrong, straight up, because Nintendo would have gone after them. They would have run them over like a lawnmower at that point. When we were bringing out the court of trial by combat, if you think like Super Mario is going to come out and fight a pal, is that going to be it, dude? Is that how it's going to go? Was Craftopia a ball? It's not about the shape of the object. The patent specifically says throwing an object in 3D space that the player has to aim to capture a creature of some kind and put it back onto your team, which is exactly what happens in Craftopia. Released in 2020. A little bit interesting. Yeah, throw rocks at each other until one captures the other. Ridiculous.
Yeah, sadly we rescinded trial by combat in the UK 200 and something years ago, but chat might have a point here.
I mean, you don't own us anymore. We could bring it back.
You could, yeah, feel free to reintroduce trial by combat.
Hell yeah.
That went historically very well for people.
Rock on. We're doing it.
Interesting case in the UK about 20 years ago where somebody tried to declare trial by combat over a parking or a kind of speeding fine.
Did they actually?
Yeah.
Were they able to do it?
No, they weren't, because it had been rescinded a long, long time ago. But they tried to do it in court. It was very funny.
Became massive news, I would expect. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Over one £25 parking fine or car fine.
Well, I think we've kind of exhausted all the things on this. I'm glad we talked about it, though. Glad I got your take on it. And for those who don't know, this is Kronos, our lead moderator, and lawyer man that knows many things about the law.
I think the interesting part of all of this case is that it isn't just about the law. It's about how businesses work and function internally and how decisions are made at a leadership level and disseminated out. Those two are often at odds with principles and kind of consumer rights, though we have to be very careful on how we proceed. Consumer rights is my background.
I think the thing that scares me the most about it is if Nintendo pulls this off, you're going to see other companies mimicking the same behavior. And I think the other thing that scares me about it is Pocket Pair is in a very precarious situation because they work with a lot of third-party partners. It is very likely that if those third-party partners see them fold on this, they may no longer want to work with them because they're like, oh, Nintendo won a patent lawsuit against it, even if it just ends up being them settling. Right? I'm also deeply concerned about an injunction against Power because we don't know what that means. That worries me. What is the injunction? What are the details there?
Kind of an educated guess would probably be to cease the use of those mechanics in any existing games and to no longer include the development of that. And a minimum would probably be that because
here's the problem,
they want to be able to enforce their patent some way.
Nintendo's going after Power World for that. It's like they completely forgot that Craftopia exists, which is also by Pocket Pair and also has the exact same mechanic. They're not calling out Craftopia, they're calling out Power World to attack Pocket Pair. I think it's probably because Craftopia is inconvenient for them.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. Some of these patents that they're kind of pulled out here they go back as far as 2021. So you're getting further back, but Craftopia is still, as far as I remember, before that. And the development of that must have started before that, because you have to remember that patents can be filed once the mechanic is being designed, not necessarily when it's been released. So however long Craftopia was in development for will also be relevant. All those internal builds and discussions and design documents are also going to be relevant for that case. There's a lot to do with it. There's probably an awful lot of paperwork being gone through, a lot of contemporaneous minutes and notes and, Teams messages. All kinds of stuff could be involved.
I think that their greatest defense is likely going to be Craftopia and showing this off, because this is the same mechanic they're going after them for, and I find it very interesting that Nintendo left it off the lawsuit. It is likely tactical for them to leave it off because it's very inconvenient. It does show prior art, which, based on what we read for Japanese patent law, prior art has precedence. I'm going to wait and see how this plays out. I hope Pocket Pair fights them to the fullest extent of the law, and to be honest with you, I hope they win.
Same. There are a lot of people in chat talking about how they could maybe move it, move their mechanics, like to give them a mini game, and if you if you complete the mini game, then you have the beast under your control and all kinds of things. But then you end up with the fact that other people are doing that. There was a Nintendo DS game I remember from a long time ago called Spectroid that drags you off into like a little kind of area. You kind of fight the boss and then you kind of weaken them and capture them and do all kinds of things. So if they chose to put a patent in, you know, Palworld would be in exactly the same spot. So you can't just change the systems internally because you'll be infringing on someone else's idea. It's not that simple.
Yeah, it's
if
not
we end
that
up at a point where every mechanic is patented, what are new games and new entrants and new indie devs going to be doing? Well, makes it much harder.
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. All right. Well,
Yeah.
let's get back to the other stuff. Thanks for being on, man.
No worries. I'll catch you later for Ashes.
Yeah. We're going to go kill some people in Ashes of Creation. Yes.
Thousands of people.
Thousands.
Millions.
All of them. Every one of them. We will be alone on this barren earth and then fight each other to the death.
And then whoever wins has to kill the server and just walk out, yeah.
We'll fight Steven. That'll be the last 1v1, and then we'll lose because he'll just instantly turn us to ash.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right, I'll see you, bud.
Yeah, bye.
Greetings. Return unscathed.